Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name is James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join into this week's episode. Now, this week's episode, well, it's a little insight into a technique or a combination of techniques that I've actually talked about before, but you're going to be seeing it from the perspective of me teaching it. So this was a session that I did in salon education, but also kind of filmed the steps as if I was doing the technique and you could see it through my eyes / the people who are doing the training. It's a great technique. We've all seen variations on it probably through my channel. If you're not new around here, if you're new, then this is an Airtouch balayage technique with kind of a money piece around the front, a root stretch into a lovely, really light blonde ends. So we're going to look at some little bits and pieces consultation wise, and things that we kind of really need to know about before we crack on with these kind of looks. And I hope you take loads away with you, and if you want to take your Life of Hair education further, then please do head to the Patreon link down in the description, and you can sign yourself up and you will be accessing some private live education through the Patreon platform. So until next time, guys, look after yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Here is our starting point of our lovely model for this training session. Now, she's very, very light naturally. She's quite light on the ends. Actually, in this particular video, it looks lighter than it actually is. She'd had a balayage very, very recently, and it actually hadn't got as light as she was hoping. There was no specific reason for that. It's more like a 9 in reality, but the ring light has made it look brighter and lighter. And her natural level is a level 7. The ring light was on probably too bright. I didn't set it. I did this in a bit of a rush, so it's not perfect. So we can see it a lot better here where the lighting is different. I'm currently explaining to the team why the ends actually look darker. And it's actually not because they're not lifted light enough. It is to a degree, but we'll talk about that in just a second as we go through this technique. It's actually that the hair is very, very dense, very, very thick, and it's almost light enough, but it's being compounded by the fact that the hair is very, very dense, and it's not reflecting the light because of the thickness of the hair individually. Quite thick, coarse hairs. Don't look too coarse, but they are on the thicker side of a normal hair strand, and there is a lot of hair on her head. So when the hair is elevated up from the head, as you saw me just demonstrating, it reflects the light. It looks a lot lighter and brighter, akin to what she was after. But when you put that section down, it just doesn't look the same, and it looks a lot darker. There is also lots of warm lowlights in that hair. So what we're doing with our technique here, we've used the Airtouch technique, which we're going to look at in just a second. And then we're picking out the low light sections that are in her hair, separating them onto a separate foil like you can see on the screen right now, and then painting those individual hairs independently. This is to avoid overlapping on hair that is ultimately already very light and is going to sit in a foil for a very, very long time indeed. Now, we do lighten some of the ends in a process that you'll see later on in this video, and actually in the underneath sections, the ones that you're currently seeing, there is a lot more lightness anyway. We just need to get rid of those low lights. So this is the Airtouch technique, and if you see how the hair is being held between the fingers, the hair is fanned out in a beautiful, well spread formation. Now this is of paramount importance to this technique, because if you pinch the hair together, the air will not pass through the hair as well because it is tighter, and you will struggle to get all the hairs that you need to make this technique look very soft and very beautiful pass through the hair section that you are holding. And I'm going to emphasize that as much as I humanly can because it is massively important to the success of this technique. So Tam has then gone in with her lightener, and she's painted up towards the roots and down towards the ends, and you can just see now on the screen where she's picking out that low light section That low light is obviously going to be a lot warmer and darker than the hair around it, and we just want to make sure that we make this as light as humanly possible. Now, just so that everybody knows, everybody is using bleach and 20 volume, and with the pieces towards the ends that have already been pre-lightened, using bleach and 1.8% or 6 volume for anybody that doesn't convert between the two very well. And saturation is still king in this particular technique, guys. You really, really do need to think about your saturation. When we're doing any lightening technique, saturation will make or break how the color is lifted and how it turns out and the results that you get from your application. I have seen it so many times in classes that I've taught, shows that I've been at, where the technical application is 11 out of 10, but the saturation is 5, and great hairdressers getting results that you know that they haven't necessarily been pitching for that, but their saturation, because they're in a rush, whatever it is, has not been up to speed. So we've moved on now. We've done all of these sections in the underneath in a horizontal formation. We're now working in a vertical formation to create lots of separation and definition in the crown area. Through the parietal ridge this will apply as well, because what we're looking for here, the image that we were shown as an example, which unfortunately I don't have, had lots of separation at the root area where they had definable highlights of lighter pieces mixed in with the natural. Now, usually to create contrast, in a lot of instances, people would darken the base color, and then this would create the separation between the two colors. But in this girl's instance, she did not want to have a darker base color, so we had to use vertical sections to create that separation. We also had to space those sections out substantially enough that we then started to see the separation in each of those sections. Now you'll see as this foil is going in by Becky that she had a few issues with the hair not going right through the section and bunching up into the foil. If you haven't got a beautiful clean section inside your foil, just use your comb, as you see right now, to nudge the colour back up towards the root area. And it's really, really important that you do that, because if you don't, you'll have these weird kind of blob specks of hair halfway through the section that you really weren't expecting, and you will have terrible blending, really bad. So please, guys, be really, really diligent about getting that hair through the section. And if it doesn't go all the way through the section and it's not completely clear of the foil that you're about to paint, make sure that you move that hair out of the way before you start painting. It will save your bacon, trust me. So again, Becky's working on saturation here. She's elevated the section to make sure that she's painting the underneath side of this section, because what we don't want here is a poor warm lift, especially in that darker area. And then Becky's going to be feeding this lightener all the way through to the ends. Now we've actually changed vol at this point, and it's 10 vol on this entire section, because we are going to rinse the back out before we go in and tone it. Now I'm not going to show you that in this video because you don't want to see me or these guys. Actually, I did rinse this out, to be fair, but you don't necessarily want to see me rinsing out some foils. We've just moved on to 10 volume for ease of use, and one of the main reasons for that is that actually using 2 bowls of colour in this particular scenario where the guys were doing a technique that they've never done before, it was just too slow. So 1 bowl of colour made things a whole lot easier in the foils. But as far as it goes for lightening these end pieces, well, we've moved back on to our 1.8% 6 volume, because the ends are very light and we only need 1 level of lift. So using a hand blending technique for the sections that are left out in between each of the foils, Very, very important to get a beautiful transition here and not take this weaker lightener up to the darker hair. Make sure that the transition is still within the lightest areas on the hair. We really, really do need to be careful of that, because I've seen accidentally people go and overlap the colour onto the darker brown, or like dark blonde in this instance, hair, and then end up with a warm transition, which then ends up being halfway through the hair, which is an unmitigated disaster to fix. So be very, very mindful of that. She secured it with a foil and we've let it process. So we're on to the side sections now. We're using diagonal backwards sections using exactly the same methodology as we did in the back, but the diagonals are for added softness. We're also making sure that we leave sufficient gaps in between each of these foils so that we get a beautiful soft transition between the two colours and a nice bit of contrast to just keep it in kin or in line with the picture that we were shown as reference. So as you can see on the right hand side now, Becky's just finishing off, and Tam is going in with the money piece. So the first one here is sliced section, very, very fine. We were focusing on just no air touch on this front piece. We wanted a definite defined piece around the face. So there's actually been 4 or 5 people working on this one technique all the way through, and I find this a really, really good way of learning. Tom in the background there has clearly switched off, but that is part of learning too. We can't stay focused 24/7 365. It's good because everybody learns from everybody and they're not all focusing on each other's, technique. It's just all about focusing on that, what's happening right there, right then. And if anybody makes a mistake, we can all gather around and say, look, this is what's happening here, avoid this, etc. And that is makes learning much faster and much easier. Now, obviously, with 4 or 5 people, it would probably have been preferable to have 2 models in this particular instance, but I think one of the models were let us down. So it ended up being that everybody kind of mucked in and, did the work together. And actually, from a learning perspective, when we did the debrief afterwards and we said, right, what did you all learn? Everybody really, really took away the points and the tips that we really emphasized on when people didn't quite get it right, or things didn't quite go, as they were supposed to, because the technique was brand new to everybody. Everybody was taking away everybody else's learning, and that was really, really fantastic. So if you're doing any in-salon training yourself, or you're doing any training anywhere, maybe consider having one model with a few of you and really, really focusing down on copying this technique or one that you've seen on Instagram, and police each other. Make sure that you're all doing the right thing, following the technique step by step. And if you make mistakes, that's okay. Make sure that you try then and correct those mistakes before they become a bigger problem. A bit like what happened in last week's video with me. So Tom's on the case now. We wanted to wake him up a bit and get him doing some work. So here he is going back into the Airtouch technique. So around the front we did 3 foils. The first one was sliced, microfine slice. Second one was a weave. Third one was a weave. There's barely any gap in between each of those foils. We then went in with a gap of about 1 centimetre, Airtouch technique, and then going in with the hand blending technique, or tipping out as some people might call this, to create that beautiful lighter, blonder feel, especially around the front here. We really want a high impact money piece. She'd had a money piece, this young girl, in another salon prior to this colour that was a disaster. It was just like a thick band of colour, so she was really nervous when I had said to her, look, we'll put a money piece in, something that she wanted, but she felt like she couldn't have again because she was so disappointed with the first time. Fortunately, we smashed it, but she was very, very nervous about having a money piece put back in. And you can see here Tom has blended up perfectly, just to the point at which the lightener from the previous balayage stops and then hasn't overlapped onto that root colour. Because again, as I said previously, we'll have a warm lift there right in the middle of the hair, and that will be so hard to correct. So we've done a root stretch on the root area. It's a stretch, it's nearly a shadow, it's kind of halfway between, it's not as right down to the parietal ridge, but the root area is 0.9 NB and the ends are 0.10p plus 0.10 N. So that's to create that beautiful, natural, but not very ashy end result that you see now. This is it straight before we put any waves in it. I know some people really want to see it like this and understand whether they can have these techniques on their hair. We can see that definition and separation that we were talking about, that was exactly like the picture that we were shown at the beginning. This young lady couldn't believe how close to the image that she showed us we managed to get it, and here it is with a wave in it, of course, the classic balayage look. Stunning result. The team worked really well, you know, working together. It was good team building as well, having everybody in on the same look and working to the same end goal, and I had a great time coaching them to that point. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've taken some bits and pieces away with you that you can then use on your clients. The Airtouch balayage technique, I think, is an absolute winner. I've said that so many times. I know some people feel really indifferently about it, but I'm a big fan of the Airtouch techniques. They do save a lot of back combing and a lot of teasing out very back comb hair at the basin, and they create beautiful diffused looks like you see right now. So what's not to like? Thanks for joining me in this episode, guys, and I'll see you again very soon for another episode of The Life of Hair.